It has been 2 years since Kenya Kwanza took over office, and let's just say things have not gone according to plan for them. What was supposed to be a new era of economic transformation has actually turned into a never-ending series of crisis after crisis for these guys. From economic blunders to political distractions, it feels like the government is actually stuck in a cycle of firefighting, except the fires in this case never seem to go out. It's one fire after the other. Now, let's break it all down and see exactly how Kenya Kwanza managed to take a tough situation and make it so much worse. Now, when Kenya Kwanza took power in 2022, it was not exactly smooth sailing for them. The country at the time was already in a bit of a mess, with high levels of debt, an economy that was teetering on the edge, and global issues like inflation, making life tough for most ordinary Kenyans. But instead of steering the ship out of the storm, it feels like they just drove straight into the hurricane. They introduced something that they called the bottom-up economic transformation model, which at the time sounded like a very, very, very wonderful idea. It was supposed to help the ordinary person, the so-called hustler, by creating more opportunities and supporting small businesses. This was the silver bullet that was supposed to solve all our economic problems. But in reality, things have only gotten from bad to worse over time. Prices for basic goods like food and fuel have actually skyrocketed, leaving Kenyans struggling to make ends meet on a day-to-day basis. Inflation has been a constant headache, and every time it feels like the government might have a solution, something else goes wrong. And there's another problem after another problem after another one. Now, instead of dealing with one problem at a time, the Kenya Kwanza government is trying to juggle a dozen different fires, and they're all dropping balls everywhere. There is just too much drama and not enough solutions. It is looking more and more like the Kenya Kwanza government has actually run out of ideas. If there's one thing that this government excels at, it is actually drama. Every day, there is a new scandal or political bickering that grabs the headlines, distracting everyone from the real issues that face the Kenyans. Now, the current red herring being used to distract us is actually the Deputy Rigathi Gachagwa's impeachment saga. This drama has been a massive distraction, taking up tons of attention and energy that could have been spent fixing real problems like the economy, healthcare, or education in this country. And it is not just the impeachment drama. We have also had endless noise about something called a public-private partnership. One of the most controversial is actually the recent deal involving the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, which is supposed to be handed over to a foreign company, Adani in this case, for a 30-year concession. People are actually outraged that the government is actually practically selling off the country's assets for a quick buck, to make a quick buck. Ile pesa ya haraka upesi. It's like every day there is a new controversy that pulls the attention away from the big picture. Now, to make matters worse, the public protests have become almost routine in this country. It's an everyday thing. Instead of focusing on governance, Kenya Kwanza seems locked in a constant battle with its own citizens, with protests erupting over everything from high taxes to failed promises. It all started with the Reject Finance Bill 2024 demos, which morphed into the Ruto Must Go demos, to Sabasaba, to Nane Nane demos, etc., etc. The streets have now become a battlefield, and the police response has only made things worse. Gen Zs, in particular, have taken to the streets to voice their frustration, but instead of addressing their concerns, the government has been more focused on suppressing the dissent instead of addressing the issues. Let's talk about the economy, which has gone from bad to worse over the last 2 years. Kenya Kwanza's big economic promise was to help the hustler, the average Kenyan who works hard to make a living. The idea here was to empower small businesses and lift people out of poverty through things like the Hustler Fund. But guess what? Instead of lifting people up, the Hustler Fund has actually turned into a bit of a disaster. The fund was supposed to provide affordable loans to small businesses, but instead, it has become a debt trap for the people. Many people who took loans are now struggling to pay them back, and the default rate is higher than anyone ever expected. with inflation still climbing and the cost of living raising out of control, people simply don't have the money to repay these hustler fund loans. This has left thousands and thousands of Kenyans deeper in debt, and the very people the fund was supposed to help are now worse off than they were before the loan. Meanwhile, Kenya's public debt has continued to grow at an alarming rate. The government is actually borrowing left, right, and center, and it is starting to look like they are just digging a deeper hole. As of 2024, Kenya's public debt hovered at around 10.1 trillion shillings, and we are struggling to make payments. Now, the International Monetary Fund, the so-called IMF, has actually raised concerns, and it feels like every solution the government proposes, whether it is borrowing more or raising taxes, just add to the burden of the ordinary Kenyans that are already in crisis. And then there are the sketchy deals with the foreign companies like the infamous Adani deal, the airport thing I just mentioned earlier. A lot of people are actually asking why the government is handing over key national assets to foreign corporations. It feels like the administration is actually trying to plug holes in the budget by making deals that might not be in the best interest of the people or the country. This is not the economic revival that we were promised. It is more of an economic nightmare. And then we have broken promises everywhere you look. If there is one thing that this administration is known for, it is making promises that never seem to pan out. Chemichemi is a wrong. Now, Kenya Kwanza came into power with big ideas, plenty of ideas. They promised universal healthcare, they promised better education, affordable housing, and a whole host of other reforms that sounded great on paper. But 2 years later, it feels like we are still waiting for most of these promises to materialize. Let's take healthcare, for example. The government talked a big game about universal healthcare, but the actual rollout has been very slow, and the reforms are actually stuck in legal battles. The social health insurance fund was supposed to provide affordable healthcare to all Kenyans, but the system is actually still facing massive implementation issues. Nothing is going according to plan. Meanwhile, hospitals are underfunded, and many Kenyans are actually struggling to access even basic healthcare services thanks to the new shift system. And then there is the education, where the competency-based curriculum, CBC, has actually caused more confusion than anything else. Parents, students, and teachers are all frustrated, and the new university funding model has only added to the chaos in the education sector. Now, instead of simplifying things, these reforms have left everyone scratching their heads and wondering why things seem more complicated right now than they were before. Even the flagship Hustler Fund, which is supposed to be the cornerstone of Kenya Kwanza's bottom-up agenda, has actually fallen short. Instead of empowering the poor people and the hustlers, it's actually leaving many people trapped in a cycle of debt. And while the administration keeps talking about big reforms, everyday Kenyans are more focused on putting food on the table as inflation eats into their meager earnings. So, where does that leave us as a country? After 2 years, it is clear that Kenya Kwanza hasn't delivered on its promises. The economy is in worse shape than it was. It's in shambles. The political drama never seems to end, and the key reforms are either stuck or falling apart. Nothing seems to be working. Now, Kenyans are frustrated, and it is easy to see why. What was supposed to be a fresh start has actually turned into a never-ending series of crisis after crisis after crisis. At this point, it is really hard to say if things will turn around in the remaining years of the Kenya Kwanza administration. They still have 2 more years to go. Actually, 3 more years to go. Can they fix the economy? Will they finally roll out the universal healthcare and fix the education system? Or will we keep seeing more drama and more broken promises? Only time will tell. Right now, things don't look too promising. Kenya Kwanza's 2 years in office can only be summed up in one word: chaos.